today. Aiden Quinn and Christine Stay, also known as Friction Farm, are folk musicians. They make their way in the world writing and singing songs of social conscience while still managing to make people smile. He's from Berkeley, California. She's from Woodstock, New York. And when not touring, Aiden enjoys woodworking and Christine bakes. They have a big garden and a small orchard at the sustainable home they designed and built in South Carolina. Welcome. We're delighted to have you.
morning. It's so nice to be here with all of you. Well, I read the newspaper pretty much every morning. And pretty much every morning, there are a dozen big, awful, overarching problems every single day. We're still wearing masks. The planet is melting down, but science is being ignored. There's a full-on war in Ukraine, and gun violence is on the rise here at home. Women are losing controls over their bodies in our country. Voter suppression is on the rise in my state. There are obvious effects of institutional racism in my small town. Do you feel that way too? Does it all just make you feel exhausted and frustrated? Well, you're not alone. Feels like we're losing hope, right when we need hope more than ever. And I hear this every day, so if you feel that, you are not alone. But I have never lost hope. Never. And I want to be clear that I don't think hope is the same thing as optimism at all. It's two very different things. And I've heard that psychologists tend to define optimism as a general expectation that good things will happen in the future. And optimists tend to accentuate the positive and eliminate the negative. It's kind of a general feel that the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice. And I'm not an optimist. But hope is different. Hope is the belief in the possibility of improvement, combined with the belief that we have the ability to make it so. That sounds very Unitarian Universalist to me. And that elevates hope above just wishful thinking. Hope is knowing that the arc of the moral universe must be bent toward justice, and believing that we have the power to do it. Václav Havel, the playwright, the dissident who became president of Czechoslovakia, he sees hope as a state of mind. He said that it's not a state of the world. Hope is an orientation of the spirit, an orientation of the heart. It transcends the world that is immediately experienced and is anchored somewhere beyond its horizon. He also says that a hopeless enterprise stands at the beginning of most good things. But what do you do when your well of hope has run dry? Remember, you're not alone. And history and science can remind us of that. Historian and author Howard Zinn says that to be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It's based on the fact that human history is not only a history of cruelty, but one of compassion, sacrifice, courage, and kindness. Remember that organized protests by small groups of ordinary citizens advanced the civil rights movement, leading to the Civil Rights Act. Bus boycotts, lunch counter sit-ins, marches, they worked. Remember that millions of people took to the streets on Earth Day in 1970, and that preceded the establishment of the Environmental Protection Agency. So you, historically, are not alone. But today, our actions don't seem to be working so dramatically well. We take to the streets, but the change isn't obvious. Today we can have record-size, multi-location, global protests, but we don't really see the results. Don't lose hope. There's a columnist for the New York Times. Her name is Zeynep Tufekci. I'm probably saying that wrong. but she's actually researched this. And in the past, a truly big march was the culmination of long-term organizing. And she describes that as an exclamation mark at the end of a sentence. So marches and organized protests, they grew from communities who bonded, and they grew strong as a team while they were coordinating and preparing. And they didn't just manage to hold a protest, they built organizational capacity. And then that helped to navigate whatever came after a big protest. So how does that work in practice today? Technology makes it so much easier for us to make a big splash, but it doesn't really help us to stay connected afterwards. And we know that the grassroots stuff, the small stuff, is really what makes the difference. Small actions by small groups growing together is what drives change. But today, we can witness the effects of the Black Lives Matter movement. Did y'all know that that group was started in 2013? 10 years ago. And it sure got an injection of energy after the murder of George Floyd. But at that moment, they were already prepared to act, to use that extra energy. And things changed. Now, the Confederate symbol was moved from the Mississippi state flag after those protests. Mississippi, y'all, Mississippi, right? But we don't hear that much. That didn't make big news. It made zero news in my state of South Carolina. And today we hear a lot about the outcry at school board meetings over critical race theory or about books about LGBT issues. We hear about that a lot. But there's a Gallup poll that has been tracking opinions on race since 1963 and gender equity later. And they say now more than ever, Americans recognize inequity and difficulties encountered by people of color. More than ever. We don't hear that. The arc of the moral universe has shifted, but it didn't make headlines. But you're not alone. Now, if history didn't revive your hope, maybe science will help. A few years ago, a group of researchers, they analyzed and combined the results of 88 different studies involving 25,000 participants. And the studies looked at how our altruism is affected after seeing someone else do some good. And in the studies, people, they read about or they saw someone acting in a kind or helpful way, and then they had the opportunity to be kind and generous themselves. And it turns out that witnessing love or kindness has a measurable positive effect. We resonate with goodness. Every single one of the 88 studies, every single one, suggests that people are decent by nature and that we're just waiting for some inspiration or motivation to act on that decency. So when you're losing hope, trust the science. There was one thing in those studies that really struck me as evidence of hope and a reason to build on our better nature, and that's that the way that we respond to good works matters. So when we see people being praised or rewarded, we're more likely to be altruistic ourselves. The positive response was more effective than shaming or denouncing any unkind acts. We can amplify the good, help balance out all that bad, sad news. We can remind people of our shared values, remind them that they are not alone, and it matters. When we only see the worst, it affects our capacity to act. But if we remember the times and places where people behaved wonderfully, that gives us the energy to act and at least the possibility of bending the arc. I love that you all are quick learners and willing singers. Thanks for that. All right, so history and science are pretty compelling. But just in case you need a little bit more, I wanted to share some personal experience. Aiden and I became aware of the importance of childhood literacy. And as you know, we're hopeful people. So we began to take steps to improve literacy among the kids where we tour, with the firm belief that that improvement could happen and that we could make a difference. And it was kind of a significant decision in our lives, but in the scope of national literacy, it was microscopic. We wrote some songs inspired by kids' books. We read to the kids. We played the songs. And whatever good that might accomplish was worth our effort. But we have a pretty amazing community of fans, and they jumped in. And we don't do any sort of crowdfunding, but people wanted to be a part of this, and some of them started a little crowdfund for us on their own. We had sparked some kind of hope in them, and in return, they sparked a lot of hope in us for our little project. And that's a big motivator. And their investment made us feel accountable. And teachers and librarians that we met were energized that we were willing to do anything to help them, and they dove in to help us get more kids involved, get more books in their hands. We were energized in their work. We weren't alone. Did we move the dial on childhood literacy? No. Absolutely no way. But my kind of hope is a plan to help improve the odds of that possibility. So did we encourage one kid to try a chapter book? Yeah, one kid to keep reading even though they were behind the other kids their age? Yes, I know we did that. We're not waiting for some utopian future. We're making tiny steps in the infinite present, an infinitesimal bend in that very long arc. To act, to do, in spite of all the negative around us is in itself a victory. As the Reverend Norman Vincent Peale said, you can change your life, I can change my mind, and together we can change the world. Hope is particularly hard to sustain in isolation, and we've had a lot of isolation lately. Oh yeah. And lots of research shows that for people working to bring social change, the personal relationships and community provide the reason for their hope, ignites their conviction to keep fighting. Research on protests, the social experiments, my own community, they all point to the value that we bring each other. You're not alone. But more essentially, the person sitting next to you, they are not alone. Are you sure they know that? Connection to others helps our social justice warriors feel a sense of accountability to recognize that their work matters. So tell them it matters. Walk with them. Write postcards with them. Remind them that they are valued, that they are part of something bigger than themselves. Tell them that they are not alone. I know that despair is really seductive. We can't change anything, so why try? And it's so clean, it's so finite. And hope, on the other hand, is really messy and inconclusive. things might work out. So should we invest all this effort into the possibility of some margin of improvement? Yes, we should. Because history and science and personal experience prove that we matter. So if you see that friend who's sliding toward despair, you know they're not alone. They have you. And you can help them see the positive. So you don't have to worry about your hope. Help restore their hope, and we won't be alone.